Hey, hello everybody, I'm Munbalance, and today I'd like to do another video highlighting the different damage rotations of certain classes throughout their time leveling. Today will be all about the Black Mage. Black Mage is as standard of a caster as you can get on Final Fantasy XIV, and to an RO player's delight, it's actually quite decent despite being magic-based. Now, opposed to just showing you the level 80 rotation, which a lot of people have already done, and will probably have a lot more expertise than I have, I'm going to go from level to level and showcase each and every time Black Mage's rotation changes, and what is the most effective way to perform at each level. The goal in this video is to help you out if you're new, or maybe if you're not so new to the game but wouldn't mind a quick refresher for the daily roulettes, which usually force you to play far below your actual level. So, we start out at level 15, where you'll finally get to queue up for your first dungeon. By this level, you won't have much in the terms of skills, but you should still be hitting pretty hard, even this early in the game. The rotation for this level is so painfully simple that instead I'm going to just talk about Black Mage's unique element mechanics. When using a fire or an ice spell, your wheel thingy will get a gem corresponding to that element. While in fire mode, your fire spells get a 40% damage bonus, but cost twice as much MP to use. You can use transpose to swap back to ice, where you will recover 3200 MP per tick. So this early in the game is just keeping your thunder damage over time skill up, and using fire spells until you're out of MP. Once that happens, then you can switch on over to ice until you're full again. Luckily enough, this is one of the few classes that does have an AoE at this level. This means that if you happen to get an overzealous tank who pulls a very large group, it's actually much better to get up close to them and spam Blizzard 2, as long as there are 5 or more mobs in the pack. At level 18, you'll get access to Fire 2, which is essentially the fire flavor of an AoE, but it's honestly very hard to use this skill. It has a very large cast time, a super high MP cost, and while it might be slightly more damage to use this, in practice it proves consistently way too awkward to use to its full potential, leading me to just stay on the Blizzard 2 bandwagon. You also get a roll skill in Swift Cast, which allows you to instant cast the very next spell, which Fire 2 is probably the best spell you have for this so far, but don't be afraid to use it for your fires as well, since it will absolutely improve your DPS. You also have Scathe, and at this level this is honestly just kind of like an emergency tool, since you're gonna spend a good portion of your time casting and not moving. Scathe is a great skill for when you need to keep moving, otherwise it's almost always a damage loss versus other magics. At level 20 you'll get the Magic and Mend trait, which for most classes is just a flat damage bonus, but as a Black Mage, you'll also get to stack up to 1 more gem on your elemental gauge. Now with 2 gems, you'll get a 60% damage bonus for the fire element, and recover 4700 MP per tick during ice phase. And then you get a whole lot of nothing for 10 levels, but at 28, you'll get the Thundercloud trait. Essentially, whenever you have thunder damage over time skill ticking on an enemy, you'll have a chance to get a Thundercloud status, and this allows you to use the next thunder spell free of cast time, MP, and oh, did I mention it does the full dot damage immediately? So at this point, if at any point you get a Thundercloud proc, use it. It also gets procs from Thunder 2, which is the AoE variant of Thunder, but the chances for these procs are much lower, and the duration and potency of Thunder 2 is also much lower. This is, however, still your strongest AoE skill if you have a Thundercloud proc. Next up at 34, you get Fire 2, which is a very important skill, although not one that you can make too much use of just yet. It's a much more powerful version of Fire, but its MP cost and its cast time make it kind of untenable for DPS. That being said, the main purpose of this skill is to swap from Ice to Fire very easily, as you'll have full Fire stacks upon using Fire 3, regardless of what you had when you started, unlike the other Fire skills, where this would make you lose the stack completely. Since when you have 2 Ice gems, you can use a Fire spell for half the mana cost and half the cast time, this is essentially the only time that you'll be able to use the skill for now. At 35, you'll get the Freeze Ice spell, and this is your AoE rotation now. Just freeze all day, freeze every day, no point in using anything else. Fire 2 is gone. Freeze is all there is now. Obviously keep your thunder up, but you know what I mean. Freeze is a really good AoE, and there's really no point in using Fire 2. Now, at level 40, you'll get another level of Magic and Mend, which allows a 3rd stack of elemental gems. This third one will give you another 20% damage bonus to fire, which totals to an 80% damage bonus, and ice will now recover 6,200 MP per tick with 3 gems. You also get Blizzard 3 at level 40, which is essentially the ice version of Fire 3, and allows easy swapping to a fully charged ice stack after your fire rotation is completed. This is also the point where your ice MP recovery becomes strong enough that your ice rotation at this point is essentially going to be going to Blizzard, casting Thunder, and then right on back to fire. At 42, you'll also get another rotation outliner with the Firestarter procs. Much like the Thundercloud procs before it, each Fire 1 will now have a 40% chance to proc Firestarter, allowing you to use an MP free and instant cast Fire 3. Not only does this give you more chances to move around, but also boosts your overall DPS, since Fire 3 is much stronger, and you get to bypass the 2 reasons that it's not realistically usable. And ta-da, we emerge at a very important level. 50, 60, and 70 are important because there's a ton of dungeons and trials that sync you to these levels. Additionally, large-scale alliance raids also take place at these levels. At level 50, we get Flare, which is a very strong AoE fire skill, which will consume all of your mana, with a minimum requirement of 800. I find this kind of tricky to use at this level, since once you're out of MP, you're kind of stuck in fire stance, you can't really do anything but transpose to ice, and you'll need to wait for an MP tick before you can use ice spells. So while it is a cool burst idea for a large fire AoE rotation, but due to the large cast time of both Fire 2 and Flare, either the mob or the tank will probably die before you get to use the Flare. Personally, I just get a Swift cast ready, throw in a Fire 3 to swap to the fire element, and then Swift cast a Flare for a nice instant cast burst, followed by a short recovery period where you're back to spamming freeze. Things definitely get a little bit more interesting after level 50, but for the most part, your rotation stays the same until the very last levels of the first DLC. At 52, you'll get Ley Lines, which essentially you draw some magic on the ground, and for a short time, while you're inside this magic circle, your cast time and your recast time are shortened considerably. For my RO viewers, it's braggy. You get braggy. While this is a bit tricky to use, it's a gigantic leap in DPS, and makes your rotation way faster. While it might seem like a waste to use this on an instant cast skill due to its cast time reduction, but due to its recast reduction, it does not matter what kind of spell you use, just stay in the damn ley lines while they're up. Unless, of course, there's an AoE on them, then move away. Dying is a massive DPS loss, much more than any amount of time losing ley lines will cost you. So survival first, but do make sure that you use these often, as they do provide a noticeable increase in DPS and also make you look way cooler. Next, you get Sharpcast. This enhances the next Thunder, Fire, or Scathe spell, and ensures that its proc effect will occur. Thundercloud will always proc when using Thunder 3 or Thunder 2, and Firestarter will always proc when you use Fire. Did you know that Scathe also had a 20% chance to do double damage? Yeah, probably don't use this on Scathe. Finally, at level 56, you'll get Enochian. This is a rather small, for the time, 5% damage bonus that stays active as long as you stayed endowed with either ice or fire elemental stacks. This means that if you make a mistake, like using Fire 2 ever, and lose the fire or ice gems, then you lose Enochian. Luckily, you can keep this buff up indefinitely, and you really only have to suffer if you mess up twice within its 30-second cooldown. Now at 58 and 60, you get Blizzard and Fire 4 accordingly. And these are the real bad boys that you want to get your hands on. These are a huge step up in your current single target damage skills, but you can only use these while Enochian's up. If you lose Enochian, no Fire 4 for you. Unlike the original spells, these do not refresh your elemental meter, so keep this in mind and make sure to not let your Enochian run out. Blizzard 4 will give you 3 Umbral Hearts, and these will negate the double MP cost of your fire spells during your fire rotation, once for each of the Umbral Hearts. This allows you to extend your fire rotation even further, which will now be comprised of a swap to fire element via Fire 3, 3 casts of Fire 4, followed by a Fire 1 to refresh the timer, then finishing up with, of course, 3 more Fire 4 casts. You should have enough MP left at the end to switch back to Ice via Blizzard 3, but keep in mind you also have enough MP to fit 1 cast of Thunder 3 in there as well. Dots are vital to keeping good damage per second, so don't forget to keep this up. Now that being said, losing your Enochian at this level is way worse of a DPS loss, so if you can't fit a Thunder in, wait until the next ice phase, since you'll need the extra time to recover MP anyway. From 62 to 66, there isn't much in the way of rotation. Instead, you get quality of life skills, and another off-global cooldown skill in Triple Cast. Triple Cast will ensure that the next 3 casts are instant. This is perfect for those long Fire 4 casts. When used, will make the fire rotation way less stress-inducing, and I should note that instant cast via procs, such as Firestarter or Thundercloud, will not count towards your 3 casts. At 68, you'll get Enhanced Umbral Heart and Enhanced Freeze, so that Freeze will now give you an Umbral Heart on top of already being the Chad AoE. The Umbral Heart will now make Flare not completely rip your mana. This also means that you can use Freeze into Flare and then back into Freeze. Or if you're feeling a little extra bursty, you just Flare again and transpose back to Ice afterward. And don't forget you can use Swift Cast and Triple Cast to make a burst of flares if you so wish to do so. Which brings us to the ultimate AoE burst, the Triple Cast Flare. If you really want to stick it to those monsters, the Triple Flare tactic is obviously something that you ought to know. First of all, start with a Freeze. Then, instead of going right into a Flare, use a Fire 3. This will ensure that all 3 of your flares are beefingly strong. Next, go ahead and use Triple Cast and hit it with an Instant Cast Flare, followed immediately by another Instant Cast Flare. Finally, Mana Front and allow the usage of a final Instant Cast Flare. And if you're the realest gamer there is, Mana Front can be swapped in exchange for a high Aether. Remember that you need an Aether with at least 800 MP, or you won't be able to completely blow away monsters with massive flare energy. Oh, and level 70 you get Foul. It's pretty good. Now, jokes aside, at level 70, this introduces Polyglots into your rotation, rewarding you for keeping Enochian up even more. This will get you a Polyglot every 30 seconds, which allows you to use Foul. This is an unexpected spell that is essentially a little bit stronger than Flare. Since this isn't invested into either element, you can use this at basically any time, and unlike Flare, the cast time of Foul is the same as your recast time. Nothing to note here, except make sure you use Foul before the timer gets full again, or you're essentially missing out on a lot of damage. But your main rotation won't change until you get into Shadowbringers content. At 72, you get a couple of new skills that make your life a little bit easier, and also expand your fire rotation. Despair is essentially a single target version of Flare, being fire aspected and draining all of your mana, but unlike Flare, its cast time short enough and its damage large enough that you essentially want to make sure that you finish each fire rotation with Despair. You can even follow this up with a Mana Front to extend this rotation with another Fire 4 and Despair. It also comes with Aspect Mastery, which allows you to, when you're fully charged into an element, you can use one spell of the opposite element, and this will use no MP. This essentially stops skills like Flare from being super awkward traps where you're just kind of stuck at 0 MP, and allows you to easily swap back with Blizzard 3, even if you have absolutely no mana. Now at 74, you get Enhanced Sharpcast, which reduces its cooldown from 60 to 30 seconds. This is perfectly timed, so you can realistically get one Sharpcast in each fire rotation, and this allows for a consistent, rather than squeezing all 3 of your Fire 4s between that initial Fire 3 and Fire 1 to refresh the timer, if you can ensure the Firestarter proc, then you can go ahead and use Fire 1 after 2 Fire 4s. This followed by another 2 Fire 4s, and then use that Fire 3 proc. Of course, followed then by 2 more Fire 4s to finish off with Despair. This also works out perfectly after you use Fire 3 that you can triple cast and get the most value out of it, since Despair has a slightly longer cast time than Fire 4. At 76, you get Umbral Soul, which allows you to kill time basically. During Ice Phase, you can use this spell, and it will give you a stack of ice, as well as an Umbral Heart. No real change to the rotation, but now you can start every fight after the initial encounter at full ice power. Finally, at level 80, you get Xenoglossy, and an additional Polyglot holder. This will give you more Let when saving your Polyglots up, but also Xenoglossy. This skill is strong as heck, and it's instant cast. It's hands down your strongest spell, and much like Foul, is completely element devoid. You can fit Xenoglossy just about anywhere in your rotation, but I'd say it's best used to avoid cast clipping with your buffs, which I guess we can cover now since we're now getting into the final and most important rotation. Honestly, it's the same rotation as before, but now you get to do that thing that you do at the max level and unnecessarily min-max the crap out of it. Like I said, once again, remind you, keep your dot up. Thunder is an amazing skill and adds a bunch of damage, both in its damage over time effect and the opportunity to move thanks to instant cast thundercloud procs. It's absolutely vital that you keep this ticking away on whatever you're fighting. Finally, you do have some skills that are off the global cooldown, but it's kind of hard to use them without clipping issues. This is essentially when you're using a buff, or for whatever the sort, and you actually end up slowing down your casting since the animation has to pass. This is extremely noticeable when you watch the skill bar global cooldown spin and see a small gap in the casting. Since your whole damage is based on how often you can cast, you'll want to minimize clipping, and the easiest way to do this is to simply use one of your instant cast skills, such as Scathe, Xenoglossy, or the Firestarter or Thundercloud procs. This allows you to slip in an OGCD buff, such as Ley Lines, without having to sacrifice any damage, since you would have to have used those skills eventually anyway. This will overall lead to higher damage and faster clears. It's your job as a DPS to make sure that you're getting the most out of your class, and while it probably won't make that huge of an impact on its own, over a 10-minute fight you can end up sacrificing thousands of damage due to inefficiency. Obviously, there is quite a bit more detail to be told here, and I would suggest looking for a more specific video if you want it. I simply wanted to brush over the, hopefully, optimal rotations for each level tier and save you from being that one dead weight person in the Alliance raid. Now that being said, that's all for me today. Like the video if you liked it, sub to see more like it, and don't forget to check out the description for links to my Twitter, Discord, and Twitch where I stream FF every Friday. Special thanks to Patreons this month for keeping the channel sponsorship free while getting cool perks like seeing videos a day early. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.